want to just simply say, we feel like we had a great year. A lot of things were accomplished, but as we've said throughout the playoffs, as we've said throughout the year, we've got so much more to do, so much more room to grow, and continue to look at the future with a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, and anticipation. With respect to, all the things that have been said, winning 52 games, that's 2 years in a row now, plus 18 and plus 24. I can assure you that's not going to happen next year. We're not going to beat 24 wins. We would be the best team of all time. But we are going to strive to get better and continue to improve and continue to aim for sustainable winning. And that is the goal of the offseason. Looking back at this year, I feel like the coaches to a man and the players to a man have done a tremendous job. They deserve all the credit for what's happened and what's transpired. And as we, move forward, we're going to look to get better in every regard. We're going to continue to look at this organization, ways to improve. We want to be the best in class in the league at every area, every department. And that is what we are striving for. And this is not about a one-year situation. This is about a long run. This is about, the next 8 to 10 years. So we've got flexibility built into our plan, both in 18 and 19 potentially. We've got the ability to improve this team this year, and if we decide to defer STEM year, another STEM year of sorts, if you will, like we did last summer, it's a situation where you might see us waiting to make a splash in free agency in 2019. But the fact that we have flexibility and optionality of both is what we have been so diligent in protecting. And the fact that we've got it, and we feel very good about the things that are out there in front of us. If we feel like there's a deal that we can improve our team and do it in the right form to help promote that sustainable winning, then we'll move forward. If not, we may defer. But with respect to this season and where we are, we're on a path. We're on a path to greatness, and we're on a path to winning a championship. And that's what remains our sole focus. Open up.
Bryan, Brett said he believes you guys need another high-level free agent in order to eventually get where you guys want to go. So I would say, do you agree with that, whether that's this summer or next summer? And if not, where do you think the growth will come from organically that you would be able to overcome that?
First and foremost, I'm going to agree with the sentiment that we need to add something to get better. We've obviously got a great young core that continues to improve. I've said it even most recently during the playoffs that what you saw out of this group, that's the worst they're going to be in playoff performance. We're going to get better. They're going to learn from this. They're going to improve organically. We've got a great development approach. Our staff does a great job developing the young talent, and Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Dario Saric, Markelle Fultz, TJ, every one of them is only going to get better. So what you saw, is an inexperienced group that went out, won a series, surprisingly to some, not surprisingly necessary to us, the way that we finished the season and the way that things concluded, but accomplished a lot. But they're a young group that still has a lot of room for growth. But with respect to adding, I'm going to say talent, not free agent, because talent comes in many forms. Talent comes in possible trade, possible free agency. And, both options loom with cap space and flexibility. And, if the right deal comes along, we'll certainly pursue it. We will explore any and all options to add that talent. But to say that this group can do it now, they obviously proved they couldn't. Adding another talent and another piece is certainly something that we're striving for. Bear in mind also that we view Markelle as a significant piece of that future, and that the deal that was made with Boston was made with the future in mind, and there's a very bright future ahead for Markelle and this team accordingly. So with that, the talent is on the way in the form of many different things, but yeah, we need to improve organically and by adding additional talent to this team.
Bryan, speaking of Markelle, is there any reason why you wouldn't want him to play in Summer League?
Yeah, I've been aware of the topic of his development. The season did just end a couple of days ago, and a lot of the discussion that has centered around each player's development has been done, somewhat amongst coaches and amongst management separately. Try not to get too much in the way of the coaches while they're focusing on winning playoff games, but we've talked a lot about Markelle's development, and we're looking at now finalizing and formulating that plan. I would say that yesterday the meetings that we had with all of the players, including the documents that Coach mentioned for each player, really was kind of a surface level discussion, but to get more granular and to get more into the details is where now we kind of take those additional steps. We are exploring various other hires for this basketball program and this organization across the board, again looking to get better in every regard. That may or may not factor into some of Markelle's off-season development. But with regard to Summer League, it's certainly on the table, and it's certainly a topic that we've broached internally. Need to probably discuss a little bit more with him specifically and with his agent and representatives and everyone else as we target the best possible plan for Markelle's development.
Bryan, following up on that, the sense has been that some of Markelle's, the genesis of some of his issues was in off-campus programs. Have you felt like you guys need to tighten up sort of making sure of what the players are doing when they're not with you? I mean, he's a valuable asset.
Yeah.
It cost you 2 first-round picks, and then obviously what happened.
Cost us 1 first-round pick, just for clarity. We selected him with one of the picks, but we. Yeah. So we effectively, selected Markelle with the future in mind. Obviously, he had, somewhat of a setback this year with the injury, the recovery, and then, overcoming, this retraining of his shot effectively. What he was able to do at the end of the season to get back on the court was jumping over a major hurdle. We wanted to make sure that if that presented itself, there was an opportunity for him to, kind of get that off of his shoulders with respect to, no pun on the shoulder, but wanted him to get that behind him so it didn't lurk and linger all summer. With respect to his development and training, it's no different than anyone else. People train with various people. Our coaches, from what we know of, have done a great job. We've watched him develop in our care this year. He's come a long way. I've often said he's not completely there. He's not at the level that he was when we drafted him, but with respect to his off season and where he's going to train, again, we're still working out some of those details, but our coaches will always be present. Our coaches, for the most part, will always be present. Guys like to go to gyms. Guys like to go to gyms and have someone, a friend, rebound for them, a former trainer. We're okay with that, as long as the things are a fit or complement what we're trying to do to help individuals improve and get better and develop their games. So we're going to be very involved in everything that Markelle's doing, but no different than everything that Joel is doing, Ben Simmons, et cetera. So he's just like everyone else, and we're focused. This is a huge year of development for this young group. Once again, we've accomplished a lot, but at the same time, we've accomplished nothing because our end goal is to win a championship. young guys, I've seen it before, can kind of get complacent. We will not allow that. That is not something that's on the table here. That is something, it's front and center in every discussion we're having with the players. They know the magnitude of this summer and how important it is for us and for them individually. And we're going to continue to, strive for the best possible program for every one of our players in terms of the off-season development.
Brian, Brett has 1 year left on his contract. Is that something you're going to look to take care of this summer?
Yeah, I've spoken with Brett on a couple of occasions this year just to let him know that it's my intention to sit down with him and discuss a contract extension for him. I don't necessarily, it happens all the time, but I don't think it's the healthiest of situations for coaches to go into a season with 1 year remaining on their contracts. It impacts so many aspects of what you're doing. So I'm hopeful that, at the appropriate time we sit down and have some discussion with respect to, his situation, and he realizes just how much we value him as the coach of this program.
Getting back to Fultz, if I could, and you mentioned he's still a big piece of the future here. It was difficult to see that this year. When people look at Fultz, when you scout Fultz, what elite skills does he have? Shooting, defense, is there any elite? What are we missing? What is everybody, your coach didn't put him in the game in the biggest games of the year.
So, to go back, if you want, I think he was a consensus #1 pick for a reason. He was the player that we traded up for with the future in mind as the best fit for this organization. Markelle had an elite package of offensive talents, shot creation, ability to get to the rim, finishing over length at the college level, shooting shots from really all over the court. I think the only thing that he is lacking right now is perhaps the shooting aspect of things, but every player makes an adjustment when they get to the league. And, take the shot out of it for a minute. Going back to the first 4 games of the season where he did play, he had some issues finishing over length. That is something that we focused on in terms of his development throughout the year. His body needed, I don't think he had ever really physically trained the way he needed to train to take advantage of his elite talents and elite athleticism. And he is right now far and away a better athlete and more prepared to take on the rigors of the NBA than he was at the beginning of the year. Finishing over length, he got much better at that. It was because of the development cycle that he went through with our coaches, going up against Dwayne Jones and John Bryant day in and day out in drills with Billy Lang. The things that he is learning to do, finishing over length and dealing with the uptick in talent, length, athleticism, and strength of the NBA, he's going to be better for that. So, if you want to look back at this year and say all the things that he's already done to get better, he's improved in a host of areas. But with respect to what we see going forward, I still cannot fathom him getting much better at shot creation, because he does that at an elite level. Perhaps tightening up his handle, ball handling wise, and making sure that the things that are coming at him are not surprises. He's an instinctive player. I think that he has elite offensive talents, and that his body and his athleticism will allow him to be elite defensively. And having said that, as green as he was with respect to those defensive schemes and defensive tendencies in the NBA that are required, I think you saw, at least the numbers would tell you, that he was very good and very disruptive defensively. So he's a lot further along, in certain areas already, despite having only played at, let's say, less than 20 games this season and about 250 minutes. Once again, I think the future is very bright for him. Getting back to why he doesn't play in the playoffs, I have to, look at that and say, had he come back 2 weeks earlier, a month earlier, there might be more of a comfort level amongst the coaching staff to trust and rely on someone to come in. What you saw was probably a staff that wasn't quite there in terms of that comfort level, and relying on a player that had only played so few minutes and a rookie. So I would say that it was, coach doing what he thought was the right thing for this basketball program to win a series. And, he at some point wasn't playing either Markelle or TJ, and he decided to put TJ in. So, there's decisions that need to be made. Coach made the decision. I can back that decision as a basketball decision that related to his comfort level. And, I would say that, as we move forward, whatever happened this past year, whatever happened in that playoff series has no reflection on what we see in the future and how Coach views his potential contributions to this team going forward.
Bryan, you've talked a lot about your willingness to wait for the right deal. Why is it so important to continue that patience, that willingness to wait as this team continues to make steps and steps towards advancing towards the next levels?
When you have a plan, you try to stick to the plan as best you can. Coach talked about, we talk about all the time, perhaps we've jumped over a certain level that the bar has been raised. Clearly the bar has been raised, and the timeline may have changed, but what hasn't changed is 2018 free agency is right ahead of us. There may or may not be a good decision to make. If the right opportunity comes along, we will move forward. If the wrong opportunity is there, we don't feel it's right for our team, for the long-term approach of what we're taking, then we'll be patient. So we have the optionality, which is right there in front of us. It's important that we don't disrupt that optionality going forward. So should we defer to 19, we'll continue to be patient and, not get caught with signing a deal just because we feel like it's the deal that sustains what, we need to, compete at next year. I will tell you that, if we go forward in 18 with respect to free agency, it does require some level of sacrifice in order to utilize all the cap flexibility that we have. Right now it's roughly about $25 million. We'll know specifically when the lottery results on Tuesday reveal themselves, so we know where our draft slots are. I will tell you that, in order to utilize the full amount of cap flexibility that we talk about all the time, it will require renouncing players. Renouncing JJ, renouncing Amir, renouncing Marco, renouncing Ersan. That's a big chunk of our production down the stretch of the season. And replacing that is going to be difficult. But we talk about organic growth that I mentioned earlier to Kyle. We talk about the possibility of adding someone via trade or free agency. And we talk about, at that point, utilizing a room mid-level exception, which is something just north of $5 million. So there are means to get back to where we were, but the decision whether or not we move forward is a long-term decision. It's a deal that we feel will help put us in a position to sustain winning for many years to come. So we will grow. We'll take advantage of the marketplace if there are advantages to take a look at. For example, utilizing the room mid-level in a tight market, utilizing minimum contract exemptions in a tight market. We'll look at everything in order to put the best possible team together. And it's, as you know, it's moving puzzle pieces around to some degree. We would love to have all four of those individuals come back, but the likelihood is probably not a real picture. So we have to figure out what's the best way that we can continue to develop our core, supplement that core with good veteran experience and players that are going to help them grow and develop, and exercise patience along the way.
Bryan,
Mhm.
Brett mentioned when he was out here that this season and the off season marked the first time really since he's been here that there's clarity about what you guys have on the roster and what you guys need to add on the roster. In that context, what, if anything, did you learn this season and in the postseason about Brett as a coach, given the clarity that relative clarity that you guys had with the roster?
So the clarity, obviously, that we speak of all the time relates primarily to who is Ben Simmons, the player, what position will he play, what is his versatility, how can we utilize, Ben in different situations, and then obviously Joel Embiid's health. Our model early on suggested we would win something less than 40 games based on scope of the entire league, based on our roster, based on what our projected development was, and some of that was historical in nature. As the season unfolded, even prior to the season, those numbers jumped to 40 based on different machinations of different rosters and different situations throughout the league. But as we began to play, Joel's health, Joel's availability, Ben's productivity being at an elite level, not just for a rookie, but for someone playing his position, that model changed. It's an evolving model as the season goes along. At some point, it may have even suggested we were going to win 51, and we all scratched our heads and said, how's that possible? Well, we won 52, and it's a far cry from the 38, 39, 40 that we talked about before the year, and I think most other, let's call it outside sources, if you will, would project us somewhere in that same range, 37, maybe I saw the top 42. But the fact of the matter is, it was Ben's elite play. It was, it was Joel's availability. But the way Coach utilized those players, the way Coach utilized the talent that came in as the season went along with some trade deadline acquisitions, with the off-season additions of JJ and Amir and others, it started to really take shape that Brett does have what it takes to coach this basketball team. I think everybody asked me when I first got here, are you going to give him the opportunity to coach? And I said, absolutely. He deserves the opportunity to not only prove that he can coach better talent, but that he should have the opportunity to finish this job. And I think he's taken a big step forward, proving that as the talent increases, as the availability of his players is more consistent, and as he can adapt and manipulate that talent, he's doing a very good job, which is once again why we're going to be talking about a contract extension at the appropriate time.
Regarding Fultz, you said to take the jump shot out of it, but that would seem to be a pretty big reason why you guys traded up for him. What's the status of it right now? Are you confident that it will be there next season? If so, why are you confident? Obviously, you've seen a lot more of him in practice than we have in games. Given the uncertainty about the injury in the first place, about the cause and effect between it and the jump shot, given his reluctance to shoot in games when he was actually playing, what gives you that confidence? And do you feel like you need to plan? Can you just insert him into your projected roster next year or lineup next year?
Yeah, I believe we can. We've seen him, grow tremendously throughout the year, as I mentioned, in ways that don't even relate to the jump shot. I think the shot has come a long way from where he was at the beginning of the season. That should be obvious based on all of the footage that everyone has seen. He's an instinctive player. I think, more so we looked at him as a really elite scorer, not so much just a shooter, but a scorer. He's got ways to create offensively, for himself and others that, once again, are at an elite level. And I think it's pretty obvious that, in the last game of the season, having a triple-double and affecting the game in so many ways without the confidence to step into an 18-foot shot or a three-point shot, it's there. It's not dissimilar to what you have with Ben Simmons right now, where you could describe him the same way. Take the names out of it, and if you start describing someone that can create, that can get to the rim, that can defend multiple positions, I think you would be describing almost the same person. But we know that Markelle can score. We know he can shoot the basketball. It's going to come back fully. And yes, it's part of our plan as we look at off-season development to try to get that back to an elite level, because although it wasn't elite, it was certainly north of 40%, which, from three-point at least, that, was something that was an attractive part of his package. But the package is great even without that.
I mean, the plan is to have them on the court together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They both aren't shooting.
Sure.
When that happens, Brett has said that you have to surround Ben Simmons with shooting.
So let me ask you a question. We're in the playoffs and we start T.J. McConnell and Ben Simmons. Is that necessarily dissimilar? T.J. brought to the table energy, athleticism, fight. He brought a lot to the table, and we won Game 4. So having said that, we may have lost Game 5 and the series, but there are situations where you look at all in. Players bring a lot to the table. You put the best basketball players on the floor and you compete, because it's no different than some of the free agents that are talked about. When you look at our team, people talk about, what are you going to add to this group? We talk about shooting as a thing all the time. Shooting comes from multiple positions, not just the 1 or the 2 spot. So having said that, we do think the two can play together. We think they've got elite shot creation ability, both of them together. Ben's going to get better. Ben's going to improve his shot. And Markelle, we are confident, will improve his shot.
Brett kind of talked a little bit about this, but whether it's for this summer or next summer, what do you see as some of the appealing qualities of this place as a destination to add talent?
There are so many things to point to that put us in that conversation, not just for, the national media to look at us and say, it's a great story and, they're on the rise. Here we are in a beautiful training complex. We've got all the amenities. We've got the resources available to us. We've got an elite medical team that continues to improve. We've got a coaching staff that is great at player development and combining pieces and putting things together. We've got a culture that we've worked hard to develop and establish and continue to grow. And everyone walking out the door yesterday said, pretty much in unison the same thing. Loved my experience here. It's the best of my career. You start hearing things like that. That permeates throughout the league. Word of mouth is big amongst players. Players know and hear and realize, where we are. They look at us as an exciting destination, and they happen to know that we have $25 million of cap space as we sit here today that potentially could be available. So we are an attractive destination. It's improving every day. It's kind of evolved. We didn't have a story to tell 2 years ago. We had a better story to tell last year, and that story's gotten a lot better as we, look at this summer in free agency.
Bryan, when you were sitting there, after you made the pick with Boston, the trade with Boston, and you had the number 1 pick,
Mhm.
did you have the option at that point to draft Jason Tatum, or was there some technicality that prohibited you at that point as part of the deal that you made with Boston?
No technicality.
You could have picked Tatum at that point.
Sure.
Thank-
Anybody else?
You guys during this playoff run have also had to simultaneously prepare for getting ready for the draft and the combine. Can you give any general thoughts on what you see coming out of the draft this year, and not, I guess, entirely related, but also maybe an update on some of the international draft picks that you guys acquired last year and what you saw from them over the last couple months?
Yeah, don't want to talk specifically about this year's draft, but we do have a likelihood of picking somewhere between 10 and 11 with that Laker pick. There's a less than a 2% chance, maybe 1.2% chance that we move up to number 1. There's a combined roughly 2.5–3% chance that we lose the pick at 2 or 3, but it's very likely or probable that we select somewhere at the 10-11 mark. And then we have the 26th pick in the draft. So we're really looking at all facets of the draft. We talk about the things that we would like to do with our roster internally. We look at some of the players that are available that could address that. And then, with the 26th pick, it starts to get into, do we have the roster spots to give up to select 2 players that will be on this team next year? We could consider doing something with a stash in terms of the 2nd pick, but or utilize the assets to combine them to move up in a scenario, or utilize in a trade, to acquire a player. So all kinds of different things could evolve between now and draft day. With respect to the players that we selected last year and the players that we anticipated would be parts of the future here, I think it's most likely that the player that you might see here early on is Jonah Bolden, who had a really good season at a EuroLeague level of competition, playing for Maccabi Tel Aviv. Excited about what he brings to the table. He's a modern-day big that can play multiple positions, guard multiple positions, can step out and shoot a 3. His shooting numbers have gone down a little bit this year, but that we don't believe is an indication of who he is as a player or a shooter. He's a grab-and-go guy. He can rebound the ball very well instinctively, can handle it in transition, make good decisions. You don't want to put him in that situation every day, but he's a grab-and-go guy that can move the basketball. He can guard multiple positions. He's very athletic, long, and as per his coach and GM over at Maccabi, they say he's got some of the best hands defensively they've ever seen. We talk all the time about putting rangy lineups on the court, playing defense. Brett talks about it all the time. Defense being the number one thing that we want to focus on, along with the other aspects of our game: defend, pace, space. He fits pretty much every one of those categories as a modern-day big, and I think he could be a big complement to our young talent here next year. Possessionix is probably not ready physically, nor did we anticipate him being ready. I know that the agent in Europe is looking at other alternatives to possibly move him to a higher level of competition. It's worked out well and favorably for Jonah to do that, moving from the Serbian league up to the EuroLeague level basketball. And the bottom line is, he's got more development to come, but bigs develop at different paces, and he's young, and we're still enthusiastic about his future and possibility. And then Matthias Lasorte also went to the EuroLeague level by playing this year with FMP Red Star, and had a good season, had a couple of moments early on in the year where he was the EuroLeague Player of the Week or Player of the Month, I believe. Not quite at that level of development, still learning the game of basketball, but another athlete, another talent, and we'll see how he factors into the plans. I don't anticipate him coming either, but the one that is most likely to join this team, if at all, is Jonah Bolden, and some of that's being discussed and talked about right now. He's got an option, an NBA out in his contract to come if it works out favorably for him and us, and that's part of a negotiation. But the team, Maccabi, has his rights going for next year in the event that he does not take advantage of his opt-out.
Bryan,
Mm-hmm.
you clearly still believe in Markelle Fultz.
Mm-hmm.
You've spoken glowingly of him, but having watched Jason Tatum do what he did over those 5 games that you saw him play in person, did he surprise you at how much he's developed, at how good he is? And do you have any inkling of buyer's remorse from a year ago?
I don't have an ounce of buyer's remorse. You can look at the results of this playoff series and draw a conclusion very quickly. I think that, as I said earlier, we made the deal selecting to put ourselves in a position to select a player that we thought was the best fit for this team and this roster moving forward, and still feel that way. And Jason is a great talent. I'm really proud of what he's done. He was very high on our board, but when you make a deal and you move forward, you do it with purpose and you do it with reason, and we had our reasons why we moved forward with that. I'm very complimentary about Jason Tatum and what he's been able to accomplish. You also look at the year of work that he put in, not quite at the level of what he did in the playoffs, and it just speaks to him stepping up even more so in the playoffs. But, you know, they should be very proud of what they've done and how they've accomplished it. But, you know, deals are judged immediately all the time, and we live in that world, and I understand it, and it's easy to draw that conclusion. But our future is our future, and Markelle's future is bright.
Bryan, in regards to some of your other international players currently on the team, what will Furkan be doing this offseason in terms of anything overseas?
Furkan was a pick in the late 20s a couple years ago, along with Timothy Lawawu. Timmy had a chance to come in early and contribute down the stretch of last season. We were excited about that. Furkan, on the flip side, stayed in Europe a year to develop and felt like he wasn't ready, but we knew him coming in this year was going to be mostly about development, playing in the G League, being around our team, working on his body with our training staff and performance staff, and feel like, you know, a lot of good things have happened for Furkan this year. Unfortunately, the injury set him back. Unfortunately, the injury set Timmy back. So those two have been, you know, kind of forgotten in a way, and we certainly are not forgetting them as it relates to their player development and their off-season work. Both players, Furkan and Timmy, are most likely going to participate with their national teams in the qualification for future international competitions. There's 2 windows of time where it's just prior to Summer League and it's just after, I believe it's end of June, early July, and then September sometime, where they have to play 2 games and 2 games. By the way, Dario will probably be participating in that as well. But those 2 players, Furkan in particular, are bright spots with respect to, you know, their talent. Again, not to, you know, put them aside. You know, they're very much a part of everything we look at every day. This is not just about 3 players. It's about, you know, the whole team, the whole roster, and it's our goal and focus to develop everyone equally. Furkan has shown an ability to make plays as a 6'7" versatile combo guard. He can make shots. He's a great shooter. Needs to continue to work on his strength and physical development. He's put some weight on. I think he's added, you know, roughly 20 pounds to his body this year. Some of that is good weight. Some of it was not so good weight, meaning you've got to get tight, you got to get lean, and you got to get quick again, because he was always reliant on his you know, agility, and that's something that may have slipped a little bit. So we're talking to him about that. You know, Timmy's body continues to grow and develop. These are young kids. I think Furkan's 20, and he's a bright young talent, and he's got you know, a skill set that we really like. So we're not losing sight of anybody, but it's likely Timmy is not with us in Summer League, but it is likely that Furkan is, depending on how that schedule plays out with respect to the Turkish national team.
Bryan.
Yes.
I mean, in respect to Furkan and Timmy, you know, their health is not at 100% or hasn't been recently, but you can project that they might play in Summer League. Markelle, for all intents and purposes, is healthy right now. What would the reason be that he would not play in Summer League?
It's everyone's at a different level of health and development, and you know, as Coach said, you like to compartmentalize some of those development stages. Every injury, every athlete is looked at a little bit differently, and in terms of trying to formulate a path and a plan. And as you know, there's just different levels of as you look at players who play in the Summer League, year 1 to year 2, generally there has something to do with draft status and where players were picked, and you know, that might be a factor in this, but it also probably is more focused on where he is in his development and where we think it's the best place for him to get to where he needs to be come September, October when we start camp next year.
With him, if he plays at the level that you expect him to play and that he was drafted and expected to play, where does that leave TJ McConnell?
TJ is a tremendous story. He goes undrafted, has an opportunity to play on a 10-win team, roughly about 1,600 minutes, comes back the next year, gets to play 2,000 minutes because Ben Simmons breaks his foot. This year, his numbers drop back to about 1,600 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And, what he has done, to add to this mix, add to the culture, to bring a competitiveness and a feistiness to this group, what he did in terms of being able to spark this team to a win, as we talked about in Game 4, that speaks volumes about who TJ is. There are decisions that need to be made along the way with certain players and certain contracts and how it all fits into the big picture. I know TJ alluded yesterday to the fact that he's anticipating we will exercise the option in his contract. We will exercise the option in his contract, and we're going to let more time play out to decide just how to treat TJ and attempt to reward him for what he has done for this program. The reality is you cannot necessarily reward everyone or have everyone fit as you move forward and as you make big decisions that affect the ultimate makeup of your team and as you go through roster construction. TJ is a valued piece of this team, and we'll do everything we can to retain him going forward. And we'll have to just let time play out to see how that factors into our ultimate picture.
Yeah, Brian, with respect to the Brett mentioned the psychological effect on Markelle that the shoulder injury had. What did you guys do, if anything, to treat that, to shepherd him through that? Did you have assistant coaches talk to him, sports psychologist? Who was kind of the point person for dealing with that?
I didn't hear Brett talk about that component. I've always said that any player returning from a debilitating injury is going to deal with some sort of psychological component of figuring it out, how to get back on the court, how to feel like you felt before. And, there was always, trying to just, it was an attempt to get back to that comfort level. How and where and when we go about that, I don't feel like we need to discuss in detail for any player, not just Markelle. But, we have resources available to us that we provide to every player going through their situations. And, I talk all the time about, it's an occurrence for every athlete coming back from debilitating injury that, you go through a component that is something outside of the game of basketball. And, suffice it to say, we're doing everything we can to make sure every athlete is given every resource and tool necessary.
This wasn't a particularly unusual or acute situation that might have required a little more attention?
Definitely has been an unusual situation. As I've told you, I've never seen anything like it. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been around the game my entire life. But, with respect to where he is, he's made great strides, great improvement, and we're still very optimistic about his future.
Brian, I sort of asked the same question of Brett, but as a motivator and as a instructive force for these players, the regular season was a tremendous success. They felt really good about themselves and should have. But then the playoff series against Boston was sort of a new experience for them. And as much as Brett and his staff coaches and talks to these players about here's what you need to do to be a next level player, do you think that experience is going to be as instructive in terms of these guys understanding what postseason basketball is now and what to really be at an elite level? It's so much different from the regular season.
Yes, entirely. We were feeling pretty good about ourselves 10, 11 days ago. This series with Boston was a little bit of a wake-up call. The things that we were doing in the Miami series, we were not able to do in this series. Adjustments were made. Things were treated differently than Miami was treating us. So it exposed us to some degree. It exposed individual weaknesses, but team weaknesses. And I think that we all have to learn from that, whether it be the players, whether it be the coaching staff, whether it be the management team, and we're all together. This is collaborative in nature. And, you know, I hate to say that there is some positive that comes out of losing a series 4-1, but it was a wake-up call for many. And I think that, you know, Brett and I have probably been there before, but some of these young players have not, and it probably is somewhat revealing, and it serves as a motivator. You know, we talk all the time about the competitiveness of our players and what we aim for as we're scouting players. You know, what's their level of compete? If you're not motivated by what just happened to us, then something's not right. And I think that there's a fire burning right now. You know, just the emotion that was shared in the interviews yesterday, the exit interviews, it was revealing, but revealing in a positive way, you know, to me and to Brett. And so this is a learning experience. It's a young group, a young core. I think that, you know, a lot of positive things are happening, and you know, perhaps, you know, the way we went out is going to be one of those positives at the end of the day.